Hey guys, welcome back to another Slightly Redneck video. This is going to be a little bit of a different kind of video. It's actually one I didn't plan on shooting necessarily, but my heart's been kind of heavy over the last week and a half, and this has just been what's on my mind. So I feel like after seeing everything that's been going on, I feel like I need to talk about this kind of stuff, just give my perspective on it. We don't talk politics on this channel very often, but most of you probably already know that I am a conservative Christian kind of guy. I believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I believe in conservative values for the most part. That doesn't mean that 100% of everything that happens in the conservative party, the right, I agree with necessarily. But generally speaking, I align way more with the conservative Republican Party than I do with the Democrat and the liberal side. But ever since the the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I've seen some really just horrible things going on here, and it really bothers me because as a Charlie Kirk fan, I watched a lot of his videos. I saw how he conducted himself with people. I saw how he just masterfully debated and did so respectfully, peacefully. Never treated anybody poorly. He was always respectful with everybody, no matter how vile and hateful they got with him. And to see these people that are coming out and just trying to trash his legacy now, and to trash him as a person, to say he was a horrible, vile person, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So I got to looking into a few of these things, and I just wanted to talk about this just a little bit, because it is, like I said, it is something that bothers me quite a bit. So one of the things that I'm seeing going around quite a bit is they're saying that Charlie Kirk was a racist. And I don't, I mean, it's obvious that you don't know anything about Charlie Kirk if you think he's a racist. I had to look into hardcore to see, like, why in the world? I mean, most of these people just say, oh, he's a racist. They don't have any proof to back it up. But the only things that I could see that would even lead anybody to thinking he was a racist were people that were cutting things out of context and putting them out there online. So one of the things is, he said that he thought the Civil Rights Act of 1964, I believe it is, he thought that was a big mistake, that we made a big mistake when we enacted the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Along with that, he also said, not at the same time, a different time, but he also said something about, and I'm going to probably get this a little bit wrong, but the gist of it was he basically said that when he gets on a plane, he sees a black pilot, he wonders if that pilot is qualified or not to be able to fly that plane. Now, both of these things, if you take them out of context, yeah, it sounds terrible. But if you actually look in context at what he was saying when he said these things, one of the things, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, he is not saying that we should not have done away with Jim Crow laws. He's not saying that blacks should not have the right to vote. None of those things. He believes that blacks should have the right to vote. What he was saying about the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is the intent was good, and you can look this up, you can fact check this. He says the intent of that act was good, the implementation was poor. And by the implementation being poor, it was a huge inflated bill that got passed, had a whole bunch of language in it. It could have been much shorter, much more concise. His words were, he thinks it could have been a one-page document that says we do not discriminate against anybody based on race, period, done. And that's pretty much in my agreement as well. The problem with that act, when it got enacted, was that it's now being weaponized and used. Maybe weaponized isn't, well, it kind of is, but it's now being used for all kinds of things it was never necessarily intended for. Things like biological men in women's sports. Now, that's one of those things, I mean, that's also one of the reasons they all call him a transphobe, which he was the furthest thing from. Now, I do not believe that biological men should be competing in women's sports. It's just a matter of fairness. There's a reason why we don't let men and women compete together, because the men would dominate every single time. And it doesn't matter if you believe you're a woman or not. You don't belong in women's sports if you're a biological man. There are roughly 800 medals, I think it is, over the last year or two that biological men that have transitioned into women, supposedly, transgender, have competed against women and won these medals from them. It's just not fair to the women that have competed all their lives, put in all the effort to be the best that they can be, and they are the best that they can be. They're the best of the women, but then they get out-competed by a biological man. And it's just not fair. And that's a whole debate we can have at another time, we could talk about, but that was Charlie Kirk's stance on why the Civil Rights Act was wrong, is because it's being used for other things that are not right. It's also being used to implement DEI programs, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which on its surface doesn't sound bad. Diversity is, in itself, diversity is not a bad thing. But when it's forced diversity is when it becomes a problem. And here is Charlie Kirk and my stance on this too. I agree with him on this completely. Is that when you force, schools like Harvard, all kinds of colleges have implemented DEI programs where they are purposefully trying to increase the amount of mostly black students, is what it is. And there is nothing wrong with, if the college becomes 50% black because based on the merit of those students, that's fantastic. But when it's forced, what happens is the test scores for those black students that are getting into those schools is 20–30% lower than the white students or Asian students or any other kind of race of student that would get that test score to get into that school. So basically they lower the standards so they can increase the number of colored students that they can get into the school and steal it from somebody that is well more qualified but happens to be white or Asian or something like that. They have to get higher test scores if you're white or Asian. That in itself is the definition of racism. When you are treating people differently because of the race of their, because of their race. And that's solely what DEI is based on. It treats people differently based on their race. Same thing, that goes back to his comment about seeing a black pilot and wondering if that pilot is qualified. All of the major airlines, and you can look this up and see, have implemented DEI programs where they push to get 50% of their workforce to be black or women. Now, here's the problem with that, is that it's not based on merit. It's not based on whether they're qualified or not. There is no problem with black pilots, women pilots, none, no issue with that at all. But if they're there solely because they're black or solely because they're a woman and not because they're qualified, and we're not saying that they're completely unqualified, but they're underqualified. But they got there because of the race or their sex or something like that. And that is totally wrong. We should not be hiring based on those processes. If it was the other way around, people would be screaming that it was unfair too. And it would be unfair for that. So his point was really that since the implementation of the Civil Rights Act, because it was done in the wrong way, that it has paved the way for these DEI programs, and because of DEI, had it not been for DEI, you never would question. If you walk onto a plane and you see a black pilot, you never would have questioned that. But because you know that these things are going on, they're lowering standards in order to increase the number of black participants, women, whatever it is, as pilots. Because of that, it makes you wonder, is that person here because they're qualified, because they're of their merit, because they're a good pilot, or are they here mostly because they're black or they're a woman or whatever? And if there wasn't for DEI, you never would question that. It wouldn't be an issue at all. That's not racism to think that. That's just logical. You can't help but think that. That's one of the things that bothers me, is you see these people say that he is racist. Now, I think a lot of those people are probably just, they've listened to the rhetoric of from one side that has called him a fascist and a Nazi and all these kinds of things, and they believe that, so it's not really unrealistic for them to believe that he's a racist. But the people at the top that are screaming this stuff and that are putting out these quotes from him, taking them out of context and fueling that, idea of race, they know better. They know the truth. So, there's really only two reasons you would say that he was a racist. Either you are naive or ignorant, or you're just plain lying, one of the two. And there's a good portion of those people that are just plain lying. And there's another portion of those people that are just a little bit ignorant, they don't know. They just see this and they assume that he was a bad guy anyway, so it's not a big deal. It's not hard. It's not a stretch. If you hear something crazy about, Hitler, for example, he said some kind of crazy thing, well, you don't bother fact checking it because it's Hitler. He's crazy anyway, so, Yeah, he probably did say that crazy thing. Charlie Kirk was not crazy. And that is the problem that we're running into right now, is that you have these people that are that are just purposefully lying and spreading falsehoods about Charlie Kirk, or anybody else for that matter, not just Charlie Kirk. He's just the one that right now that we have as the example. So it's not. So what happens with that is that anybody like me that stands up and says Charlie Kirk was a hero, he was a good guy, they just automatically think that I'm also a racist, a fascist, a whatever, these things they labeled Charlie Kirk with, which aren't true at all. So it's all purposefully to divide us as a country, and it's not right. Now, you do own some personal responsibility before you go out and tweet these kinds of things. Fact check them. It doesn't take any time at all to fact check, was Charlie Kirk a racist, and you'll find out, no. All those quotes, did Charlie Kirk say that he questions whether black people can fly planes or not? Well, it's going to give you the context of that quote, and you'll understand what he was talking about. It's not, he wasn't a racist in the slightest bit. His whole point really, more so about, he also talked about the Great Society that was implemented and how that did more harm to the black community than it did help. It was the worst thing that's ever happened to the black community. He's absolutely right about that. If you look at before that time frame, there were still some inequality, there were still things that were going on that needed to be corrected for sure, but the black community was thriving. Their families were strong. They had lower divorce rates than white communities did. They had the lower crime rates than white communities did, and it's completely reversed now, completely reversed. That whole Great Society was a terrible thing for the black community, and that's not racist to say. That's loving to say. To tell the truth is loving. It's a way of showing love for people. I saw him debate plenty of people that were black, that were white, that were Asian, that were LGBTQ, and he was always kind and respectful to them. He never demeaned them. He never did any of those kinds of things. To call him a fascist is completely ridiculous. If you listen to the way he talked, one of the things they talk about how he was anti-immigration. He's not anti-immigration, he was anti-illegal mass immigration. And you can see, I am too. I think it's a bad idea to just open up our borders and let anybody into the country. We have huge drug problems, we have a housing crisis, we have all kinds of issues that we need to fix. We don't need to let everybody else in the world just freely come in no matter who they are. Especially people that don't want to assimilate into our country, that don't want to come in here and they don't have the same freedom of speech, ideas that we do. They don't have the same values that we do as a country, and it's going to cause problems for us one way or another. So I agree with him on that. He wasn't against immigration though, and I've seen him plenty of times talk to people that were immigrants and congratulate them on doing it the right way and talking and again treating them with respect. He never once said he was anti-immigration. It was anti-mass illegal immigration is what he was talking about. And that, whether you agree with that or not, you can't call him a fascist for that. You can't label him that way. That's not an out there extremist view. That's a pretty common, everyday, most people kind of agree with that kind of thing. There's other quotes that were put out that said, he didn't, he thought that black women didn't have a brain. And that is completely, that's a lie. He never said that specifically. He did say he thought these 4 black women had low IQs and were not qualified to do what they were doing. He was talking about specifically 4 women. Michelle Obama was one of them. I'm not sure he was right about that. I think she's probably pretty intelligent, but that's neither here nor there. But there were 4 women he was talking about. They happened to be black. He didn't say black women don't have a brain and he said these 4 women are what did I say? They have lower intelligence. They're not qualified to be doing what they're doing. They're basically DEI hires, and they're in there because of their race, and that's it. Again, whether you agree with him or not on those 4 women, that's not a race issue. It has nothing to do with. He didn't say that black people don't have high IQs. He didn't say any of those kinds of things, and it's just terrible to label him that way without doing some fact checking first. The other thing that I've seen. That they're not going to give him empathy because he said he didn't like empathy and he thought empathy was a made-up thing. So, okay, That quote is completely taken out of context too. If you look up the entire quote, he basically said that he didn't like the word empathy. He thought it was a constructed term by the left, that they use it for all kinds of things, that there's no way you can feel feel what another person is feeling. Instead, he liked the word sympathy, showing sympathy for people. That's what we should be doing, is showing sympathy. So, if you take that quote completely out of context, it makes no, it does sound bad, but it's not what he said. And again, it takes you 2 minutes at the most to fact check this stuff before you just go out and roll it back out. Now that goes for the same thing, for people on the right too. I don't see as much of that, where I see people on the right just throwing names at people. What I see on the right, and maybe it's because I'm more on the right, so I do see more stuff on the right, and little bits on the left. But what I see on the right is that they may say, this person's not qualified to do something. Here is the evidence for that. I don't see them saying that person's a racist and just leaving it at that. It doesn't happen. I don't see them taking things out of context and posting them. I have seen it before, and I've called it out when I have seen it as well, but it's not as common. It's not nearly as common. It just really bothers me that that we've got all these people that just buy in to this idea that Charlie Kirk was such a terrible person just because somebody's slapping quotes out of context all over the place. And then by association, those of us that think Charlie Kirk was a good guy, that want to put up memorials for him or whatever, then we've got to be awful, evil people as well. And it's all based on a lie. There's no truth to it whatsoever. You can disagree with his opinions, but you cannot say he was evil, that he was spreading hate. You cannot say any of those kinds of things. The other thing that I hear them say is that he said that that gun violence was just a part of having guns. And he did in a way say that, but he's absolutely right about that too, is that we have a Second Amendment right to own firearms to protect our households, to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government, to protect our other rights. All those reasons is why we have a Second Amendment right to own firearms. And along with the right to own firearms, there are going to be a certain number of firearms-related issues, deaths, and things that occur every year. And that's just part of having firearms. And I think, he would still say that even after what happened to him. He would still agree that it's worth, we should not give up our Second Amendment right. And the way I thought he had a great analogy with that is like there's a certain amount of horrific car crashes every single year. People die, but nobody wants to get rid of cars. It's just part of having cars on the roads and roads to travel on. There's going to be a certain amount of car accidents that go along with that every year. Now, the difference you can say is that, well, those are not planned. Some of them are, but not most of them are not planned out. Like, they're not intentionally wrecking their car to kill somebody. And maybe that's true, but it's irrelevant. It doesn't really matter. If somebody's going to commit murder, getting a gun out of their hand is not going to do that. The gun stats that are given by the left generally are extremely misleading. I think they quote somewhere around like 30,000 gun deaths a year. Well, the vast majority of those are suicides. They're not actually gun-related deaths. And then a vast majority of the remaining ones are inner-city gun violence. There's other underlying things there. It's not a gun issue. It's a mental health issue. It's a gang-related issue. It's those kinds of things that are going on right there. So anyhow, that doesn't mean, he never once excused any of those kinds of school shootings or anything like that. And I think that's a common misconception that people on the left have of us on the right, is that because we like guns, we're just saying, well, it's okay to go out and have school shootings. No, we condemn that completely. It's horrible, tragic whenever somebody gets shot and killed for whatever reason it is. It's a horrible, tragic thing. But we're not willing to give up our rights because of that. There's underlying issues there that getting rid of guns would not fix. And it's, the other thing that they say about him is misogynistic. And I don't know where they get that at all. The only thing I can relate that to is that he was a pro-life person. He believed that every human being deserved human rights, regardless of what stage of development you were in. And I agree with him there. Life begins at conception, and it is murder to abort your baby. It is killing them. And for us to say otherwise is just not true. So that's not a misogynistic view. That's a human view. That's that most people in the world, or well, most people in this country anyway, would have agreed with up until about 20, 30 years ago. And then somehow things have changed. But again, my point to this is that if you want to disagree with him on values, you want to disagree with me on values like that, it's fine for you to do that. But it is wrong for you to call him a racist. It is wrong for you to call him a homophobe. It is wrong for you to call him a fascist or any of those other kinds of names and labels that they stick on him, because of things that were taken out of context and were laid out there. And it does damage to us all. It's a terrible, terrible thing that we have to deal with, where we have a country where people just can post whatever they want about whoever, and nobody even fact checks it. I mean, if I saw a quote, I am a conservative guy, there's a lot of people on the left, but if I saw a crazy quote about, like, say, AOC, for example, that she says she thinks all white people should die, I'm going to fact check that. I'm not going to just take that as face value, because that's crazy. That's way out there. Why would you not want to fact check that before you just spit it out there? Unless you just don't care if it's true or not, and you just have so much hate in your heart that you don't even care about whether you're spreading lies or truth about the person you're going up against. But so anyhow, what should our response to this be? I mean, the Charlie Kirk assassination was a terrible thing. I believe it was an attack on us all, attack on free speech, attack on us as a conservative party. But our response should not be to repay evil with evil. That's not the Christian response. We should continue to do these things where in what Charlie Kirk did, we talk to people, that we be reasonable, that we have discussions with people and explain our points of view, and don't hate them for it. That's exactly what I've always believed, and that's what Charlie Kirk did just so fantastically. So, I may not be the most eloquent person to speak through these things, but look all this stuff up on your own. You can figure it out, that what they're saying about him was not true, that he was not a misogynistic, fascist, racist guy, and you can fact check that stuff and find out pretty quickly that that's not who he was. But anyhow, again, didn't mean to bring everybody down, don't mean to get too political with it, but it's just something that really bothers me, and I just felt like I had to say something. So if if you want to unfollow me because I am a conservative Christian, then that's your prerogative. Go ahead and do it if you want to. I mean, if you don't feel like we can get along just because we have differences of opinions, then that's more your issue than it is mine. And I'm happy to go on with my life and not worry about it too much. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I didn't upset anybody too much. And as always, God bless.